What's up, y'all? It is time for another episode of Culinary Mechanic. It is time to bring in someone super cool, man. I recently got connected with this guy, and instantly, I just kind of I finished with the call, and I thought to myself, "Gosh, I found one of my people." So, his name is Dave Gieselman. He is a former chef. He does breath work. He's all about flow state, creating flow states, and really limitless potential in people. And he's just got a different way of looking at things, and I think that it's pretty poignant in today's world of chefs and hospitality operators because there's so much stress to it, and he's got a really good head for kind of how you deal with that, and it's not just the standard coping mechanism. So we're just going to get into it, and I can't wait for you to hear this. I really think you'll dig it. So enjoy. You're listening to the Culinary Mechanic podcast. I'm your host, Simon Zatyrka, the founder of Culinary Mechanic, a restaurant advisory firm focused on making kitchens and restaurants run like well-oiled machines. This podcast, we aim to bring you insights, strategies, tools, and tactics, and sometimes just good old advice and stories that are going to help you run your restaurant better. I hope you dig it because honestly, it's a real labor of love. One thing you could do that would help me a whole lot is to go anywhere that you listen to podcasts and leave a 5-star review. That'll help get the word out so that more people will hear this podcast, and hopefully we can help more restaurants run just a little better. Now please, enjoy the show. Today I am joined by Dave Gieselman. He runs Limitless Flow, and he is pretty fond of saying, just fucking breathe. So, Dave, welcome to the show, man.
Simon, thank you so much.
I'm excited to have you here. As we were introduced recently, it's kind of cool to encounter people who live parallel lives, as we were both in LA at the same time, but really just kind of different parts of the city, but both in kitchens. I just love it. I'm excited. I can't wait to kind of hear what's going on in your world, but also, as is custom now with Culinary Mechanic, tell me how you got here, man. Tell me how you got into the industry.
It's great to be here, and yeah, I'm so grateful we got connected the way we did. Getting to know you and getting to have this connection has been really great for me, and getting to develop you as a friend has been a real blessing and real pleasure. So I want to thank you for bringing me in the way you did. So yeah, like I started cooking super young. Like I began cooking like appallingly young. Like, why is there a child in the kitchen? Why does he have a knife? Like, who okayed any of this? So my first W-2 from a freestanding restaurant, I was 13 years old. Uh and both my parents, my counselor had to sign my work permit. There were all kinds of rules. I couldn't work, I think, more than like 12 hours a week. It was, and then when I was 15, I think I could work, like 18 or 20 hours a week, something like that. I mean, so it wasn't like child labor. There were people looking out for me. But I was also working 5 years before that in the production kitchen of a catering company owned by friends of my parents.
Oh
I
wow.
was fascinated. The first time I got introduced, and your audience will relate to this. The first time I got introduced to a a commercial kitchen, to a professional kitchen, there was knives, there was fire, there was yelling. No two people were doing the same thing. There was just this chaos to it. People moving everywhere. There was so much activity and action, and it was happening in every direction, and it was very normalizing for my brain, right? Like it was like giving an ADHD kid Ritalin. Like I walked into this, and it was just normalizing. This is what the inside of my head sounds like all of the time. I could just make sense of it. It looked exciting. It looked fun. It wasn't intimidating. It wasn't uh you look at a kitchen like operating at full speed, like at full tilt. You watch it and you're like, I don't know what goes where. I don't know who to follow. I don't know what's going on. And it just made sense. It was just, and so I got started, and I got to they taught me how to use a knife, and they taught me how to mix things, and they taught me, and I got to, like, I was making dressings and emulsions in a big steel blender, right?
Oh,
And
wow.
so they would help me measure all this stuff out, and I was a kid, but this was interesting to me, and they would help me like get ingredients down from the top shelves, and they would show me how to measure. So I learned how to mise en place everything out. So get it all together. And then we start adding stuff in. So you add all the stuff into the blender and get it blending. And then you take the lid, you get it running, and then you take the lid off and you
Oh,
slowly drizzle oil
yeah.
into this thing. And it felt so grown up. It felt dangerous because it is like, that's like, and they were clear about it. Like, so anything that goes across the line of this blender gets blended, including little boys. So just so
Yeah.
you know, like, somebody threw a tomato in one time and I'm like, oh, gotcha. Like I'm clear about anything that goes past the top of this blender gets blended, right?
Hey, good night,
So,
Gracie.
yeah, yeah. And so, and so I got to like drizzle oil really slow into this thing, and I'm now making emulsions, and I'm doing like interesting things, and it was and none of like my friends were doing anything like it. Like, none of my friends, they were playing with GI Joes, and they were, doing different stuff, and none of my friends were doing this kind of thing. And I was just fascinated. It felt grown up. It felt cool. I was in love. And so that's how I began cooking. And when I was 13, I got a job at a Marie Callender's. And I was working in there. I was on the baking crew, and it was just a wild sort of experience. And what happened is I was busy trying to figure out, because like, culinary school out of high school is not one of my choices. We didn't have a bunch of money when I was growing up, so going to culinary school wasn't on the table for me. And so I trying to figure out, so what does a chef's career arc look like? What does that look like? How does that work? And the best piece of career advice I ever got, and I give it to this day, was, if you want to make money, work for people who have it.
Oh, wow.
And that made sense to me, right? And so I grew up here in Los Angeles, Northeast LA, and as soon as I could reasonably get to Beverly Hills, I started working in Beverly Hills, right? Because if you want to make money, work for people who have it. Because people who have money understand the value of employee retention through benefits, through continued education. They're not trying to nickel and dime it. They're not trying to pay you the least amount of money and get the most amount of work out of you. They understand that it is more expensive to train your replacement
Right.
uh, than to just pay you more and continue your development. It is in their interest. It is in a restaurant's interest to turn their dishwashers into their cook one. Like, it's just in your interest,
You know,
to promote from within, to develop your own people. You develop that loyalty. When you are loyal to them, they will be loyal to you. And when you invest in them, they will turn around and invest right back in you. And so early in my career, like, that was the career advice I got, was, if you want to make money, work for people who have it, which means go get the crappiest job in the best kitchen you can get into.
there
It
you
doesn't
go.
matter what it is. Like, go be get the swing shift, like, go get the swing shift overnight, like, onion chopper in a hotel, in a good hotel in Beverly Hills, right? Because in 3 years, you'll be AM chef de cuisine, right?
Right.
You'll be AM sous chef,
Right.
in 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. I tell you, that's fascinating to me. It's really different than the way I did it, but it's also very similar,
Mm,
right? I mean, the advice I was given was work.
yep.
Like you want to be a cook, you want to be a chef, work, boy, work. And it was go, 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 But I think that, I mean, that advice of work for people who have money, what a revelation, right?
Mm,
Because I would have to say that there's a whole lot of environments that are restaurants, that are hotels, that are hospitality driven just in general, that are grinders, right? Like they're not thinking about how to retain. They're just thinking about how to drive that middle of the P&L number down, get that labor cost down, the food cost down, so that hopefully it trickles down to the bottom, right? But
right.
I think that I think that we can all agree that there's you look out there in the internet and television, and there's people going, well, the rich people teach their kids differently. Well, shit, there's clearly more than one way to run a restaurant
Right.
successfully. But it's fascinating to me to hear sort of that advice. I mean, makes total sense, right? Go
Well,
go work for the people who got it.
when you get into those environments, what really separates it, right? And we can apply this to any area in life, is scarcity mindset to growth mindset,
Totally.
right? And go work for people with growth mindset, right? Do
Right.
not, and I love mom and pop shops. They're the salt of the earth. I love them, but they're trying to squeeze a dollar out of a dime, right?
Yep.
And they do everything they can, just like you said, to hit those numbers. Whereas some of the bigger places with more money, with they're looking at long-term success, not end of the week success.
Hmm.
Right. And so we look at our own sort of resources. And are you struggling to make the rent, or are you actively putting money into your retirement?
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's the same sort of thing. It's scarcity mindset. We only have so much. We got to figure out how to make it work. And if you can stretch into growth mindset, which doesn't mean you're not going to work your ass off, but it means I am willing to invest. Like we're not trying to squeeze a dollar out of a dime. Yes, things are hard, and you're trying to operate in the best you can. And people who have money are simply using tools, techniques, and systems that work better than people who are struggling.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Some of the best dressed line cooks I ever encountered came out of kitchens that were over in that area. I mean,
Mhm.
I was a little bit farther east. I was more in the kind of the old Hollywood area. I worked for the Patina Group, and
Mhm.
we can all agree that like there was two major camps back in those days, and
Mhm.
it was Puck and it was Splikal,
Right.
and those were the two biggies, and they just operated so differently.
Right.
Like I remember hearing the stories of um like Puck would take one or two big events in his catering company, and Splikal would take every damn thing else.
Right.
Right? He would take everything and just like pull his hair out, and cause chaos and strife within his ranks. I mean, I remember being a restaurant sous chef getting calls to go do catering and it wasn't, hey, do you want to pick up a shift? It was, be here at 6.
Right.
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 Okay, so get going way too early for in life for many people, and then your second sort of turn is equally early at 13. I find that there's some recurring themes and patterns with cooks and chefs. I feel like, you know, 5, 7, 9, 10 years into the job starts to become a career, but there's always that door that says, hey, you can go and you clearly have other skills, you have intelligence, or not, but what do you want, you want to go outside of this door and go do something else. So many of us stick around, and for better or for worse. Um, what was that for you? Like, what kept you in the industry?
So like many cooks, uh, it wasn't the food that drew me to it, right? It was the chaos, right? And most cooks I know are attracted to chaos, right? Like just naturally attracted to chaos. And if you're attracted to chaos in some aspects of your life, you're probably attracted to chaos in other aspects of your life, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
and very similar to like the Anthony Bourdain story, like as I grew and I moved into better and better and better places, like I found myself like I was the 20-year-old junkie line cook, right? Like I was the 20-year-old line cook with a handgun and a bag of dope in my backpack in my locker at work. And at some point, you're exactly right. Like I began to love the food. I began to love like the skill aspect when you began to realize that I'm really good at something that not a lot of that everybody does. Food is ubiquitous. It is the number one way human beings show each other love, care, and affection, right? It is the number
Wow.
one way that we nurture each other. And so everybody eats, everybody figures out how to feed themselves. Very few can do it at a really skilled level, right? And and let me backpedal out of this before your comment section fills up with hate. There are a lot of home cooks who are better than most than many chefs. There are a lot of abuelitas out there, and there are a lot of grandmas and there are a lot of mamas out there who are far better cooks than the professionals who are operating in professional kitchens. It's a different skill set. Like being able
Absolutely.
to cook, being able to cook in a precision way, in a consistent way, plate after plate after plate after plate, night after night after night after night, is a skill that is very different than your mama's skill. And she is a very good cook. And I'm not putting my skills up against anybody's mama. I ain't doing it. Right. But
Yeah.
let me just make that disclaimer that I'm not talking down anybody's grandmother's cooking. However, I learned that I was really good at this thing and I could make things happen. I could replicate dishes by tasting them. I could manipulate flavor, smell, and texture very
Excellent.
naturally and very easily. And really that's what it was. And I was at a place in Pasadena when I'm like, I like this. I mean, before it was, I do this because this is what I do. I enjoy the chaos. It pays the bills. I was cooking all the way through high school, and the guys that I was cooking with were doing very different things than my friends in high school were doing. Like they were going to like Mexican cowboy bars and stuff. And because like I was a cook, I was doing the same thing. I got invited to all those places, right? And so they were eating different, they were doing different stuff. These other cook sisters were way more interesting than my buddy's sisters, right? Like, and they were all Latino, they
Yeah.
were all Mexican, and so it was just very the world that they lived in was so much different than the world I lived in, and I was fascinated by it. And then yeah, I kind of discovered that I liked cooking. I liked the food. I liked being skilled at something, like really skilled at something. And that like kind of took me in a direction, right? That's when I bought, my first copy of like Culinary Artistry, right? Is when I
Oh,
bought, which I've given away like 100 copies of over my career.
yeah.
But it's when I started like buying cookbooks. I think Blue Ginger was like my first was my first cookbook and then a Wolfgang Puck cookbook and I began like reading cookbooks and reading and doing this stuff. And that's when it shifted for me.
If you've ever found yourself saying, there's got to be a better way to run a restaurant, we should talk. Imagine no rifts between the front and back of house, joint spotless, people are excited to be at work, and you're making the money you've dreamed of. Listen, Culinary Mechanic is here with the strategies, systems, and tactics to help you have the restaurant where everyone wants to be. We're talking about sustainable change. Systems that you can implement and execute day in, day out. If you'd like to find out more about how Culinary Mechanic can help you run your restaurant like a well-oiled machine, I'd like to invite you to use the link in the show notes to book a free 30-minute consultation call. Let's talk about it. Ah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean you're stirring up stuff that I haven't thought about in a long time, but I think you hit on something for me that is really elemental, and it's the community aspect of kitchens. Like that group of guys, Dollars to Donuts, they didn't give a shit who you were or what color you were or really anything. If you had proficiency and you could handle your business, you were one of the family,
Hmm.
right? And I definitely was drawn to that kind of thing, and that atmosphere because I was the nerdy kid in school. School
Hmm.
was stupid easy for me in many aspects, and to the point where like almost boring, right? But here
Right.
and I didn't fit in real well because I it was easy for me, right? So I went crazy on kind of went tilted my pendulum way out on that side. But then when I got into kitchens, like I was just one of the gang, right?
Right.
And I sucked at first. Oh my God.
Oh,
Like
we all
the
did.
idea that I had to prove myself at 16, 17, 18 years old. And some of these guys looking at me going, well, you might be smart, but you don't have any common sense. And I'd be like, well, I'll show you. Right. So I love it. I also like thoroughly enjoy hearing somebody else go, yeah. And I started to like gain proficiency, right? It's
Hmm.
like, what these hands and that knife and I can taste it and go, oh, and I can recreate that. And it's like it feels magical for sure. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, the first time that like your hollandaise doesn't break or whatever, or it breaks and you know how to fix it. You don't go like, chef, I but it becomes like this working part of your brain, like how food chemistry works and how flavor works and it just kind of becomes this, and why throwing a little bit of chicken stock into that thing tightens up that sauce, and you're like, this is amazing. Like this is amazing.
How does that work? Yeah. I tell you, the first time that I put a sauce in front of my boss and he couldn't tell the difference between his and mine, that's when I knew we were going somewhere.
Right.
you know.
Right. And you
Um,
start getting really proud of what you're making.
totally. Totally. I think yeah, there is an ultra addictive quality to all of those things, right? Like I think back on those days for myself and I go, I I didn't even have a choice at that point. Like I couldn't have done I those doors open for me, right? Like I could have gone to college. In fact, I dropped out. I was going for engineering and
Hmm.
there was just no fucking way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are
This is what
not
I
my
do.
people. Yeah, those were not my people. My people were over there, you
Hmm.
know.
Right. And it was
Sit
perfect because I didn't have to deal with humans. Like I was just like the greasy little cook in the back. And I was with my people and I was with guys who were like foul mouthed and weird, and I'm gonna say guys and women because I'm very fortunate to come up in a time where while it was still male dominated, I like every kitchen I was ever in, there were women in, and you didn't mess with them. Like you didn't, like they will a cook circles around you, and b beat your ass in the walk-in if you
yeah,
get fresh with them, right?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I do remember one young lady who she looked like this like little tiny thing, but man, if you messed with anything on her counter, because she was the one who put together the buffet for in the hotel in like the three meal restaurant, right? For that
Mm-hmm.
hotel. She put the dinner buffet, so she got an entire counter. I had a station. She had like this whole thing, a whole space off to the side, and if you took one spoon off of her, she knew, and she was grabbing you and going, put it back,
Right. Right.
right? But I'm pretty sure she fit underneath my armpit. She was tiny, right? But you wouldn't mess with her.
Right. Right. I got to work with women like Sherry Yard. I mean, these were the women in my sphere when I was growing up in kitchens, and women that could cook circles around you who had fire and passion and knowledge that I wanted. Like I wanted what they had, and and like misogyny like wasn't a thing. Like I was happy to be in kitchens where like sexist jokes weren't a thing, because little Shayna, right, who's down the line from me, will stab you. Like she will. She will. She can cook better she's better than you. Make no mistake. And she will stick you. Like
Yep.
she will.
Yep. I remember I would say that was a little bit later in my career. Like I was probably, there was a couple here and there, but when I started to see like line cooks that felt like that were women, but they felt like their energy was the same as mine or the same as, right. I was a sous chef in LA, and I remember her. She was like 6 foot tall. Her name was Christina, and she was bad to the bone. She had a palate that would just make like she could taste and be like, "Oh no, you need to do this, this, and this," and I'd be like, "I'm not tasting that at all." That's when I knew I was like, "Huh, okay, right." But also, I that she was the reason why I started hiring more female cooks, because what I figured out was, A, they're neater,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they keep things cleaner, and their drama was way different and just didn't have anything to do with being on the line. They would have drama outside of the restaurant. They would have drama that was thoroughly different. But
Right.
when it came to like getting things done, they were their palates tended to be sharper. They kept their knives in pristine shape. They were cleaner. Yeah, that she was definitely like a turning point for me, right? So Christina, if you're out there, I love you, kiddo. Um, but yeah, it's just such a different shift, right?
Right.
Talking about shifts, you've gone and done some pretty interesting things, to be perfectly honest with you.
Right.
So how does one go from chef to breath? Tell me about what you're doing now and kind of how it has come about.
So today I left professional kitchens in 2017. June 15th, 2017 was my last day in a professional kitchen. And today I do coaching, I do speaking, professional speaking, and I facilitate breath work. And I've been doing it for a long time. And what happened in the piece that I knew we were going to talk about this, so I kind of left this piece out a little bit. Started cooking professionally super young. Kitchens are stressful places. And I, like many young cooks, attempted better living through chemistry, right? And
Yeah.
and it turned out for me that was not going to be a long-term sustainable solution for me, right? That was not going to work for me. In my early 20s, substances got taken off the table for me, and my coping mechanism had to change. My environment didn't. And so I was in super high performance environments night after night after night after night, with no coping skills that I was familiar with. And so I've now been sober most of my life. I let substances go in my early 20s, never looked back. I've been sober most of my life and needed to find a way to regulate my nervous system, dopamine, endorphins, fear, all of it in a practical way. Because yeah, you can get through the evening on 8 Red Bulls, right? But I need you to get to sleep tonight and do it again tomorrow. And and 8 Red Bulls really serve you tonight. They don't serve you tomorrow, right? Because tomorrow it's 10, right? And there's a diminished return. And so I've been on a 25-year lay study of neuroscience, peak performance, flow states, breathwork, mindfulness, meditation. I had to figure out how to drive my own system.
Right.
And if you're a cook and you've been doing it for any amount of time, you understand what flow state is. You understand that thing where like everything falls away, time dilates, like your shift lasts 20 minutes, you put out 300 plates like flawlessly, every piece of communication is dialed in, like you're completely in the zone, and you get through the night and you finish it up and you're exhausted, but it just passed, and you were just on point all night. And I began studying why that was, and what was the physiological thing that was happening in that process, and how to dial it in. And I began studying SEAL teams and extreme sports athletes, and reading a bunch of books about flow state and about transient hypofrontality and a bunch of like nerdy weird, like not woo woo, but just like how the brain and the body and the nervous system all kind of work together, because I had to find something that worked, because I was at that place where leaving kitchens was not an option. Like it was not, I got to give up this. I'm not giving up this and that.
Right.
And so one night, I've been doing this for a while. It was working. It was it's trail running and doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Spartan races and all this like crazy shit that was just helping me keep my nervous system regulated, and doing a ton of breath work and a ton of meditation. And one night I had a bar manager. I was sitting next to a dumpster on a milk crate, shoveling food into my face like you do. And I had a bar manager sit down next to me and went, "My life is a shit show, and you always look like you know what you're doing. What are you doing? I know what they're doing, and I know that that's not what you do." Right? Was basically the conversation. Like, I know you're sober, right? Because I didn't make a big secret about it. But they go, "I know you're sober. Like, so how come you always have your shit together?" And so I've been coaching for 20 years. Like I'll tell you, but you got to invest, right? Because if you don't put some skin in the game, I'll tell you, and it gets real. It sounds novel, but you're never going to do it, right? And so all the way through mentoring young cooks and moving through kitchens, I've been shouting, "Just fucking breathe" at cooks now for 20 some odd years, right? Like, I need you to set everything down. I need you to take 3 steps back. I need you to take 3 deep breaths. You are operating from fight or flight. You're operating from your sympathetic nervous system. Your neocortex is offline. Your frontal lobe is offline. You are responding in fear, and you're not making good decisions. I need you operating from a sane place.
Right.
And I get guys taking a few deep breaths, their nervous system comes back into their parasympathetic nervous system, their neocortex and frontal lobe come back online. Now they're operating from high functioning parts of their brain, and can operate in the context of a 20 position deep kitchen, right? Like the line at Spago was 22 deep on a Saturday night, right? It was, and I'm not in contact with all those people. I need to be making decisions that work within the context of what I'm doing, and maintaining the ability to maintain your nervous system in that became how I did things. And I developed a reputation for as a guy who could kind of keep calm, could kind of keep a cool head on their shoulders, and really loved it. And so when it was time for me to leave kitchens, right? Been doing this for a long time. I don't want to really, it was when Charlie Trotter died, right? Was it 2015? Right? Left behind a couple of kids that didn't know him, and a wife that couldn't stand him because he had always just one more thing. I need to get this book out. I need to get one more restaurant open. Michelin's in town. That's always like one more thing, one more thing, one more thing. 3 months later, best chef in the world, 4-star Michelin chef kills himself, right? Like 4 months after Charlie Trotter died. And I just began like asking the question, like, what am I doing? What's the end game here? What do I want? And dying in my own restaurant wasn't the goal. leaving behind a kids that didn't know me and a wife that couldn't stand me wasn't the goal. I'm like, well, what do I want out of this? And what I really realized is that I loved the coaching, I loved the mentoring, I loved teaching people how to do it, and I could do it outside of the context of kitchens. And so 2017, I left professional kitchens. I worked with some really great breathwork instructors. I developed my own modality. And so now I speak, and I work with a couple culinary people, but I really had to step away from culinary because you just get, somebody just wants you to come watch their line, and like, no, I'm not going to watch your line. I'm not going to analyze your costs. I'm not going to do that. Right. If we want to talk about why your kitchen has an adversarial relationship with the front of the house, we can have that conversation. But I'm not going to get into your kitchen with you. So leaving professional kitchens and like speaking professionally and leading workshops on a neuroscientific approach to stress reduction and to nervous system management, time management, task management, overwhelm management, and working with professionals and leaders and groups and organizations and individuals in industries where it's not front loaded like it is in professional kitchens. Right. Because at some point you got to figure out how to get that thing working, or you leave, right? You burn out, right? And how many people have you and I know that burned out in their 20s and 30s because they could never figure out how to regulate
Oh, wait.
emotionally, mentally, all of it, right?
I'm raising my hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And watching guys who are really talented, who I really loved, men and women, like burn out in kitchens, like just kind of broke my heart.
Yeah.
And so this is what I do now, and I don't work exclusively with culinary. I work with, I'm industry agnostic, but I just like in kitchens where you have to figure out how to regulate yourself in, business ownership and entrepreneurship and everything else. The game is the same, and the game is like high performance. And so I work with high performance players and I teach them how to do what they do. And so really it began with a need. I was willing to give up drugs and alcohol. I was willing to give up cocaine and whiskey. I was unwilling to give up cooking. And since I was unwilling to give up cooking, I had to figure out what I had to put in place of that to keep me in the game.
Right. That's awesome. I freaking love it. I think that what is so important that we get out of this episode, the real key takeaway for me is like, it's such a great, it can be such a great industry, right? But there's such a toll to it,
Mm.
right? And we as an industry, and I think that this is due to a whole lot of external factors, and that's an entirely different conversation. But the way that things go, the pressure, the intensity, they set us, they feel, they sound, they look a whole lot like crisis. So that's why, right? That's why
Mm-hmm.
people are falling out of, as you said, their cortex and their frontal lobe, and they're going into fight or flight because that's what it is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that being able to recognize that, being able to say, hey, I am operating in this crazy space. I've got to regulate myself because I know that for myself, probably very much like you and thousands, if not more, right? Like the way that you take the edge off of that stressful day is whiskey, and cocaine was a very brief thing for me, but and
Right.
that was probably I don't even think I'd turned 21 yet,
Right.
right? But by the time I got to 21, I was like, nah, I can drink. I definitely prefer to smoke pot. Um,
Right.
but something had to take an edge off, right? And I very much like you, I'm now in a place where I'm not having to take an edge off. And just very recently, like this magic thing happened. Like I just stopped looking to take the edge off, and I all of a sudden my consumption of things, not because I said, "Oh, I'm gonna stop," it just slowed down.
Right.
Just rapidly, like drastically. I went, "Huh, I don't desire I don't need the next beer."
Right.
Right? I still have a beer, I still drink whiskey, but I find that it is far less, right? Like I
Right.
think that um there's nothing to take an edge off. Like I'm not as stressed anymore,
Right.
which is really fascinating given that I spent 33 years in the industry and like my entire life that was just how things were done. I love the fact that you understood it fairly early on and that was not sustainable and replaced it with other things. But I also love the fact that like we all I think that a lot of people have expiration dates in the industry, right? Whether you know them or not.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. All right, because I have pinpointed the expiration date, right? And as the culinary mechanic, I will give this to you, and you can use this 1,000 times. So cooking is a passion-driven industry, and food doesn't have the market cornered on this, but it is one of those passion-driven industries that takes from you more than it gives, right?
Sure.
Right? It extracts more than it gives. And there's a lot of industries like that, law, medicine, teaching. There's a bunch of them that just take from you more than they will ever give to you.
Right.
And the day you are no longer in love with it, get out.
Yeah.
The day you wake up and you are no longer, not I just had a hard day, not just whatever, but the day you are no longer in love with it, get out. It will fucking kill you.
Yep.
It will. The day you're no longer in love with it, turn in your notice that day. I promise it's not going to get any better, because the day you're no longer in love with it, you're not going to fall back in love with it.
Yep.
It is it takes from you more than it gives, which is fine as long as you're in love with it. And the day you're no longer in love with it, get out. It will fucking kill you. That's the expiration date.
For sure. I think that mine was my barometer, my litmus test for those moments was, is it bringing me joy and or am I having fun? Because having fun in a kitchen, having fun at work was always a thing, even if it was paperwork driven for me. Like if I could geek out on a spreadsheet for years, right? But at some point the fun goes away, and that's when I started to realize it, right? I know that I went way past my expiration date. I know that. I now know that, but it took me a couple of years to figure that one out. What a fun conversation. I love and I'm gonna use some air quotes here, the Batman Begins feel of the origin story leading through to the things that keep us through. Love where you've come out of the tunnel into just fucking breathe. So my last question for you really revolves around something that's kind of been deep in my consciousness a lot lately, and that is how, or A, what is a win in your day? And B, like, how are you going about winning your day?
What is a win? A win in my day is, that's a tough one, brother. Because my life is ridiculous. Like my life is so good. Like my life is my life is full of stuff I love. Like there's absolutely nothing. There's no part of my day. There's nothing that I have to do in my day that I'm like, I don't want to do that. There's nothing. There's no part of my job, my business, anything that I have to drag myself through. Right. That I like, you just got to get this done. Eat the frog, like whatever the dumb phrase is. Right. Like there's no part of my life that is that. But the way that I do that and the way that I win that is real simple. And the three highest leverage things that you can do to affect your day-to-day life is if you do 10 minutes of breath work, 10 minutes of 10 minutes of journaling, and 20 minutes of meditation a day. If you can do those three things, do them shitty at first, do them a couple minutes at first, but find some like Wim Hof YouTube video, find like whatever, and do like just a little bit of breath work, ramp it up. So like every day you're doing like 10 minutes of breath work, 10 to 20 minutes of meditation, and 10 to 20 minutes of journaling. If you do this consistently every day for 60 days, you will be unrecognizable to yourself. If you do it consistently every day for 6 months, you will have a different life than the one you currently have.
Nice.
period.
I love it.
So it's real simple. It's real high level. Add journaling, meditation, and breath work in the smallest possible increments, and do them as shitty as you need to at first. We were all shitty cooks at the beginning, right? Like, do it like shit. It's cool. Just do it.
Right.
You'll get good at it. It will stop being a chore. But that is how you begin, and that is how you win.
Nice. I love it. I love it. Dave, thanks for joining us, man. I love getting people to just come and play in my sandbox and figuring out like finding the things that bring us together, finding the things that are intriguing, and I know that from after now I've been doing this podcast for just about 8 months, just over 8 months, and it's not every week, it's not every month, but every once in a while I get either like a DM in my LinkedIn, or I got a text from an old cook, and he said, "Hey man, thank you for doing that podcast." I said, "Why?" He goes, "I don't feel alone anymore." He goes, "Not everybody has the same story I do, but boy, there's a lot of stories that are similar, and there's a lot of moments that are similar, and I really appreciate it." So I think that what you had to share with us today is pretty fucking important. So I really appreciate it. I will make sure that in the show notes your social handles and your websites are available to whoever's looking for them. To all of you out there, please keep listening. I can't thank you enough, because you talk about things that you wake up and you're excited to do. This podcast has really become that for me. So take it easy.